Hi, this is Ralph Wirtz, Managing Editor of the Midland Daily News, and this is another edition of Front Page. Front Page is a cooperative effort between Midland Community Television and the Midland Daily News. And during our time together here, it's a half-hour show, we talk about various topics that people are interested in. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics today, but they all relate to one thing, and that's the budget reality in Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk about not where we've been, but where we're going. My guest today is Representative Dave Camp. Welcome, Dave.
Well, thanks, Ralph. Thanks for having me.
So I'm glad you're in town for a little bit of time, and because I understand your workload's picked up quite a bit this year. You want to explain to people just a little bit about that?
Well, it's been a busy year. I've got a new responsibilities as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and we're a committee that deals with trade, tax, health care, Social Security, and welfare. And obviously, there's 37 members of the committee, so I've got to try to set the committee's agenda and bring bills through the committee. And so there's a lot of working with other members and really trying to stay on top of the issues. But I'm enjoying it a lot.
Okay. How does that work? Do they bring up topics to you that you might want to put through the committee, or is it a kind of where everybody gets an opportunity to bring things up, or how does that actually work?
Well, you try to have good ideas, and obviously I work with members of the committee to sort of figure out what direction we're going. And I think it's very important to work on fundamental tax reform. We've got obviously these pending trade agreements, and then also work with leadership. One of the first things we did was repeal the onerous Section 1099 provisions that were put in the health care law that would require small businesses to file a great number of 1099s, anything over $600 in spending. That's been repealed. The president has signed that repeal. That was one of the things we did this year.
Didn't you try to get that taken out before it even became law?
Well, I did, and didn't quite get there, but it's out now, so that's the good news.
Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of pushback after the health care bill passed to get that taken out. And it's a really good thing, a lot of paperwork there. Let's talk a little bit about the budget deficit. And you met recently with President Barack Obama on deficit reduction. Let's talk about all the talks that have been going on and where we're going to, where you see us going in the future as far as the deficit reduction. We know that certain things have to be done. I mean, everybody, including the New York Times, has editorialized that certain things have to be done. Just enlighten us on those.
Well, we hit our debt limit in May, but we actually default August 2nd. So we have this time period where we need to really address raising our debt limit. It's required by our Constitution. And just recently we had a vote in the House floor on should it be an unconditional increase. It means just increase the debt limit with no reforms, no spending cuts, just kind of continue to do what we've been doing. And obviously that failed. I'm very glad it failed because we do need to have a serious discussion about what we do about our debt. It's not sustainable. Our debt right now is the same size as our full economy. So the debt's 100% of our economy. That's $14.3 trillion. We only, for a short period during World War II, had a debt that was 100% of our economy. But we have very difficult economic times, and so we do need to begin to reduce our spending, both in the immediate term, that's in the bills we vote on, what's called discretionary spending, which is about a third of the budget, and in the long-term spending, or the long-term commitments that the government has made on behalf of people, whether that's Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those are called entitlements or mandatory spending. That's about 2/3 of the budget. That goes up every year whether we vote or not. So we do need to see out of the Biden talks that are occurring between Vice President Biden and members of the House and Senate of both parties some real reforms, or we're not going to get approval to raise the debt limit. If the U.S. were to default on the debt, it would mean that our bond rating would decrease and that it would make it more expensive to borrow money. So not just for the government, which would mean that our interest on the debt would shoot up rather quickly to, say, $1 trillion over the next decade, which would be
$1 trillion in addition to what we're spending?
In addition to what we're spending on our debt. So it would increase significantly, and the cost of everything that you borrow would go up. Homes, cars, boats, whatever it is you wanted to buy to build a business, all of those things would be more expensive. So it's very important that we take this action now while we have a little bit of time to address it. What you don't want to wait for is an immediate crisis, where our bond rating has already been downgraded and we're reacting. Both Standard & Poor's and Moody's have sent the signal that the U.S. has to get serious about its debt. And so we know that we need to do something We need this bipartisan agreement. It's going to take Republicans and Democrats to find those savings across the board and in Medicare and Medicaid in order to move forward. So I'm hopeful those things are part of what may come out of this discussion.
Okay, where do we stand as far as agreements on anything? Is there any agreements that you're aware of at this point in time?
I'm not aware of any agreements now, but we have a bit of a time to do that. I know they are meeting regularly. They're meeting this week, even though we're not in session, and they're trying. I think the president, there was a meeting at the White House just last week with Republicans and the president, and then he had a meeting the next day, which I attended, with Democrats and the president. And in that meeting with us, he said, I want to get this addressed sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait until the very end. I don't think we want to see a countdown to default like we saw a countdown to shutdown. This is a very different issue. It's an issue that is far deeper and far bigger, and we need to make sure we handle it the right way.
Has there been any change in tone in Washington since Moody's, actually it was Standard & Poor's first come out with theirs, and then Moody's just last week?
Right.
Has there been any change in tone in Washington that you've been able to discern since those warnings have come out and made people think, holy mackerel, somebody is getting serious about this? Well,
it just adds to how important it is we do it, how serious it is. It sort of is a building block, and it puts another building block in place that we got to really do something. Also, the vote not to do an unconditional debt increase, I think, sort of cleared the way and took that issue off the table. And now we need to make sure that whatever debt limit increase is there, and they're projecting $2 trillion over the next 2 years, that we have to have, the speaker has said, at least that amount in spending cuts.
At least that amount in spending cuts. And does that seem to be the sticking point then? Everything has to be in spending cuts, or is it in tax increases, or is it a combination of both? Where do you see that going?
Well, I think the White House has said that they would like to see tax increases. I think that's the wrong direction to go, because much of that would fall on small business owners. In fact, they want to tax incomes at $250,000 or above. Half of the people who pay taxes at that level are small business owners. You know, when they say they need tax increases, I say I need to repeal Obamacare. I mean, I think those are issues. They don't want to move on that. I don't think we need revenues right now. We really need to demonstrate to the American people we're serious about cutting spending. I think they think if they just get more revenues, that'll take the pressure off and just continue to deficit spend as they have in the past.
Okay, we understand, most of us out here in the hinterlands understand why the debt was so big in 2008, 2009. It was the bailouts, the more money having to go into infrastructure needs, just as a matter of trying to get us out of the recession. But now, this is 2 years later, and we're still seeing the $1.4 trillion. What is contributing to that?
Well, the real ramp up was, of course, the stimulus bill, which was $1 trillion in spending. But again, they've continued to spend. I think the EPA budget was increased by 100%. Huge increases in what we call the discretionary spending, but we're also getting big increases in the entitlements too. 10,000 baby boomers are retiring a day. We have to look at a different approach, particularly for Medicare, for those not at or near retirement now, but for the future, because it's an ever decreasing population supporting all the retirees. So we need to make those programs sustainable for the long term. And the way to do it is not simply to limit the benefits, as I think the health care bill will end up doing through the IPAB, the Independent Payment Advisory Board that was set up in that bill.
Can you explain what that is to people? Because I don't think there's 10% of the people out there that understand it.
Well, the health care bill instituted what's called an IPAB, an Independent Payment Advisory Board. They're going to be bureaucrats, they're going to be appointed, and they will determine what Medicare benefits are necessary and what services will be allowed. And so what they'll be able to do is say, gee, we won't necessarily prevent you from getting that services, but we'll decrease the reimbursement to your doctor or to your hospital. So either the patient is going to have to come up with the extra dollars, or they're not going to be able to get the treatment that they desire. I think that is the wrong approach to take. I think what you want to do is try to find a way to have Medicare dollars go to plans so that they're offered, and then people are able to subscribe to those plans, much like we do now in Medicare Part D. It's a program that has over 80% approval from seniors because of the way it's structured.
Part D is the drug program that was started, what, 8 years ago?
Oh, 6, 05. The prescription drug benefit, which again, I think that's the direction we want to go with Medicare, because it really will give seniors the kind of choice they want, the kind of individual care they desire. And I think this idea that we're going to have a one-size-fits-all from Washington with today's personalized health care trends, I think is not going to work.
Okay. How does that differ from the Medicaid Advantage programs that they have out now, where you get the personalized care that you want? You can buy the eyeglasses, you can buy the dental, whatever you want.
It would be very similar to Medicare Advantage, very similar to those kinds of programs, although there would be more alternatives available.
One of the hits against the Medicare Advantage is that it costs more than traditional Medicare. Would that still be so in the future?
Well, it does not to the extent that Democrats have said it does. They're required to have any overpayment actually go into offering those additional benefits. So when you actually compare apples to apples, it is really only about a 3 or 4% difference. And part of that is to get these established. Many of these Medicare Advantage plans are in what we call underserved areas, where there really isn't the ability to get care, whether it's in a rural area or a city center, urban population. So those were really to get those established. Many people have those plans. They're eliminating those because they don't like the private sector component of it, where you actually have, it's a Medicare plan, but it's offered through a private health insurance company. And I think that is the wave of the future. That is the direction we need to go in order to keep this program sustainable for the retirees in the future.
Okay. And one of the things that would occur is that there would be premium help for those on the lower scales. How does that work?
Well, it wouldn't go directly to individuals. It would be available to them based on an income level. So yes, if you're at a low income level, you're going to get help with that premium, just as you do now. But you're also going to be able to choose the sort of health care plan you want. And if you have the ability to have more, you're going to be able to, change your premium just as you can with Medicare Part D. You can either have a certain plan and pay a $10 premium, or pay a $40 premium, have other benefits. So you're going to have to be able to have a similar approach. And then you won't need to have the Medigap coverage. 90% of seniors have some sort of supplemental insurance to Medicare, whether it be Medigap or their retiree insurance. And this then would mean they wouldn't have to do that. They'd be able to get that all in the one plan.
And the Medigap came about because Medicare was not covering everything?
That's right. Medicare wasn't covering everything, or they wanted not to have to pay for co-pays or other benefits that they'll be able to get in a private plan.
Okay. How does this differ from like an HSA, where I can get a higher deductible, or would that be part of the new Medicare, so to speak?
Well, an HSA right now is a higher deductible. You can roll lower premium. You can roll over from year to year what you don't use. Mm-hmm. So that allows you to build sort of a cash amount. Whether that would work in a Medicare setting or not, we could see, but it certainly should be an option, I think.
Okay. So let's go back to recap that a little bit. People over the age of 55 right now would not be affected by anything that's suggested in is it fair to call it the Ryan plan?
Well, it passed the House of Representatives, so now it's the House. Plan. Well, it's the House budget because it was a bipartisan vote, and so it now passed the House. I would say that plan it would allow for Medicare to be sustainable well into the future.
Okay, and describe for me the alternative.
Well, there is no alternative. I mean, we don't have a budget from the Senate or from the President that deals with the long-term approach to Medicare. And you're right, anyone 55 and above would not be affected under the House budget plan. But again, we need the Senate to pass one. We don't have a plan from them.
Have they come up with any indication of what they would like to see in a revised?